Hey everybody, your eyes are not deceiving you. This is a new episode of CJDExplains, the Shannara Chronicles. I know it's been a good minute, but it took me a little while to figure out exactly what I wanted to do going forward since the show is sadly no longer with us. So today is the first in a new series of covering Shannara Chronicles and the Shannara books, the universe, if you will. Specifically taking a look at characters from the show and or books that are interesting that deserve a little bit more time. So without further ado, let's jump in. Today, in this inaugural episode, if you will, we're going to be looking at Cogline. Cogline. Was he a crazy old hermit living in the forest with his granddaughter, or one of the longest lived druids in Shannara history? The answer, as we will see, is both and neither. I can't think of another character in Shannara that Terry expanded on in this way. Cogline went from a brief appearance in the original trilogy to a pivotal figure in the entire history of the Forelands and the legends of Shannara itself. He really is a unique, wonderfully crafted character, so let's jump in and break everything down. And there are spoilers here, so there's just no way around it, so you have been warned. But of course, not for the show, because it is DOA. First up, we have a failed druid. To tell the story of Cogline, we must travel all the way back in time to the first council of the Druids, as I have covered in my Shannara Chronicles Explained History series, which I will link in a card somewhere. The original Druids were men and women who had retained some knowledge from the old world, science if you will, as well as those who had either discovered or preserved the knowledge of magic. Cogline comes out of the group that had preserved the knowledge of science, the power of the old world. He joined the Druid order to set about doing the work of preserving this knowledge and applying it along with the collected knowledge of his peers for the betterment of the new world that was emerging, the Forelands. At some point, the first Druid Council decided to abandon the pursuit of scientific knowledge, since it was the misuse of this power that had led to the destruction of the old world. Cogline felt that this was a mistake. Magic was unpredictable and corrupting, whereas science, when applied correctly, was a much more manageable and dependable power. When he couldn't convince the Druid leadership to change their minds, he left, taking with him the knowledge of science and a very early version of the Druid sleep, which is a magic ritual that allows a Druid to pass decades, even centuries, with minimal aging, and in the case of magic users, recover their magic after it has been expended. He also took a couple of other small bits of magic that he thought were innocuous and less dangerous with him, but for the most part, he's a man of science, and that's important to remember. Next up, we have first appearance. Cogline makes his first appearance according to publish order, meaning the order the novels were written and published, in Wish Song of Shannara, the third book in the original trilogy that started off the entire Shannara universe. Here we find him as a partially insane hermit living in Darkland Reach in the wilds of the Upper Anar, in a place called Hearthstone, with his granddaughter Kimber Bow. When we meet him in Wish Song, he seems to be a very old man who wields strange powers to the people of the world of Shannara, but we as the readers quickly understand are bits and pieces of the science that we know today. In reality, at this time, Cogline is around 700 years old due to his use of the Druid sleep. He found Kimber as a baby and adopts her, and he really is partially insane. In later books, we find out that he assumed the identity of Cogline the Hermit so well that he actually sank into partial madness. It took him years to shake himself out of it. In Wish Song, Cogline helps Bryn Omsford, who possesses the Wish Song, a power that was passed on to her by her father Will Omsford after his prolonged use of the Elfstones damaged him, embedding a portion of their power in his genetic code. We don't see Cogline again until the Heritage series, which is 300 years or so after the events of Wish Song. Next up, we have the truth of Cogline. It isn't until the Heritage series that we learn the full truth of who and really what Cogline is. His history stretches all the way back to First King of Shannara, which tells the story of the forging of the Sword of Shannara and the first war with the Warlock Lord. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, Cogline was active at the beginning of the Druid Order, eventually taking his scientific knowledge and leaving to continue his work alone. When Bremen, the rebel druid who would later adopt and mentor Alanon, needed to forge a sword that could not only hold the magic that would end the threat of Brona, but also serve as a weapon worthy of a king, he turned to Cogline for a scientific procedure that would allow them to create the strongest blade in the Forelands. After some convincing, Cogline consents and shares with the greatest weapon forger in the Forelands a formula from the height of the Age of Science from the Old World that would create a nearly unbreakable blade. Armed with this knowledge, the skill of the bladesmith, and the magic of Bremen, the Sword of Shannara was forged. Years later, he would be summoned by the Shade of Alanon to mentor Walkerbow, the descendant of Bryn Omsford and Kimberbow, who had inherited the responsibility of bringing back the Druid Order as the first new Druid since Alanon died, which happens at the end of Witchsong. It's in the Heritage series that Cogline's long life finally comes to an end. And we find out later, even though he firmly rejected the majority of the Druid creed and life, he ends up joining them in the Hadeshorn, or the Hadeshorn, as a shade that can be conversed with later by future Druids. Lastly, we're going to look at major differences. So there are a few key differences between the Cogline we see in the novels and the one that appeared in the TV series. Firstly, Eritrea appears in Elfstones of Shannara, and Cogline is introduced in Wishsong of Shannara, so they never meet, let alone have an involved relationship. Of course, he does have interaction with Bryn Omsford, who is the daughter of Will and Eritrea, so that's, something to guess. It's 1 degree of separation. Secondly, Cogline is 100% against the use of magic, other than a few small things he deems necessary and controllable, like the Druid sleep. Seeing him use Druid fire in the show was a real betrayal of the character from the books, for me at least. And combining science and magic together into a weapon would have been anathema to him. Lastly, Cogline was by nature a loner, with the exception of a moorcat, which is essentially a mutated mountain lion, with an almost magical ability to camouflage itself. And his adopted granddaughter, he always preferred to live alone and avoid being caught up in the conflicts of the Forelands. Seeing him leading a community in the show was a real departure from the source material, but not one that bothers me as much as him using Druid fire and creating science, magic, hybrid weapons. Okay, that is it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It's been a long time since we've ventured back into the Forelands, but this will not be the last or even the most interesting. I think I finally just decided to throw caution to the wind and just say screw it, and I'm going to be bringing my unofficial season 3 videos to you soon. I'm finishing up the first one right now. It's 3D animated, mostly narration like I do here. I'll just be narrating a story and you'll see visuals go along with it. So there's no voice acting or anything, so don't worry about cringiness on that side, but essentially 3D motion visuals to accompany the story I'm telling. So the first one of those will be out as soon as I possibly can. It's a lot of work, but I'm really having a lot of fun, and I think hopefully you'll enjoy it, and it hopefully does a good job of tying up the loose ends from the end of season 2. So that is it for me in this video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, go ahead and give it a thumbs down. It's free internet. I won't hold it against you. And if you liked having these character studies, like this one in Cogline, go ahead and let me know who else you would like to hear about or see from the books or the TV shows, and I'll do my best to get a video out about those. So that is it for me. I will see you guys in the next video. Have a great day. See ya.